Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is our TNA episode for the week. Let's jump right into it with the so-so segments of the night. Basically the stuff that wasn't bad, wasn't good, it was just there. We're going to start with the opening segment. We had Eric Young come out, followed by MVP and his crew. Basically setting up if Eric Young beats 2 out of the 3 members of the crew, he gets to decide what the stipulation for the pay-per-view is. Now, the reason I didn't like this and this fell in this area is you're 3 days out for a pay-per-view and now you're going to say a stipulation. That's something you should have been building for a couple weeks at least. Leads us right into a match with Eric Young versus Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley seems to injure Eric Young's back early, which would be the recurring theme through the night. Lashley picks up the win, goes to do more damage afterwards, which brings Samoa Joe down to the ring to help save his friend. I guess it was okay. I kind of knew when they did this that it would be something like he'd have to win 2 in a row one way or the other, so it made sense with what they did. But just not a great overall segment in my opinion. Now the next thing I want to talk about is Ethan Carter III and Rockstar Spud doing some kind of weird Maury show thing with Brooke Tessmacher, trying her to get her to spill information on her former boyfriend Bully Ray, which brings out Bully. We get a moment where he tells her he's sorry for treating her like crap and he hopes her life is good. I didn't get the point in this. Other than that, again, set a stipulation for Bully Ray and Ethan Carter III's match, make it a Texas death match. I didn't get the point in this segment. If Brooke would have turned on Bully Ray at some point and joined Ethan Carter and Rockstar Spud, it would have made sense. If Bully would have had to really stop them from causing damage to her, or those two reunited, it would have made sense. Overall, just a weird, odd segment. Which followed up by the last of the 3 matches. We're going to keep the second for a little bit later. Eric Young versus MVP. Eric Young picks up the win when MVP purposely gets himself disqualified in order to do more damage to Eric Young's back. After the match, Eric Young picks a cage match for the stipulation, leading us into hopefully MVP's crew not being able to get in. Comes out today, a day after the show, that MVP's not even going to be able to wrestle. So, just a weird set of circumstances around, almost snake bitten in the way they promoted it. Yet another reason why TNA taping shows so far in advance is a bad idea. They could have pushed the abort button, or they could have, in my opinion, they should have came back and recorded something to explain why MVP couldn't wrestle at the pay-per-view. Just my opinion. You have him looking strong, and then all of a sudden he's not going to be able to wrestle. Yeah. To the people that don't read the internet wrestling sites and do watch TNA and do order the pay-per-views, it's going to be a little bit confusing, in my opinion. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go into our bad segments of the night, the stuff I just didn't like. This segment started off good with Magnus and Bram talking about Magnus's new attitude. I like where they're going with this. I'd like to see them as a tag team. I think they'd be a solid team, which brings out Willow. Talks about himself and Jeff Hardy like they're 2 separate people. Talks about that Magnus and Bram will have to face them, and they keep asking who them is, which brings out Abyss. The second that Willow, aka Jeff Hardy, jumps on the screen, this segment becomes a bad segment. It is such a ridiculous character at this point. Somebody in the back needs to go, Jeff, this isn't working. We want you to just be Jeff Hardy. Be the guy that sells t-shirts for us. Be the guy that sells hats. That sells, autographed pictures. I don't get it, but the guess that I'm going with is that they let him do this in order to keep him happy. But ultimately, it's hurting the Jeff Hardy brand and it's hurting the TNA brand, in my opinion. Next up, we have the match with Robbie E versus Nux. I'm a fan of both these groups, the Menagerie and the Bromans. I thought they'd have a nice little feud. The way it played out with the music constantly playing, the Robbie's afraid of the clown, I don't know, it just was, to me, it reminded me back of when Doink the Clown was around and was bad little corny segments they used to do, and that's what this was. It was a bad, corny little segment, in my opinion. Nux picks up a big win for him. I think they could be more revolutionary with this than what they are, and that's why I ended up not liking the segment. Now, coming from that, we're going to go into our question of the week. Last week's question was, who do you think is the most misused talent in TNA? We got some answers from our friends, and then we'll get into mine as well. First is from Zombies40. James Storm is misused big time. He could put on some really good to great matches, whether it's on Impact or pay-per-view matches. Yet hasn't really been involved in main event angles since Lockdown 2012. I understand there's only so many spots in the main event scene, but I think he should be in main eventing Impacts at the very least more often. Totally agree. I think James Storm's one of the handful of wrestlers that TNA got that can actually be a legitimate main eventer in TNA. Not to go off too far on a tangent, but if you guys are familiar with when Paul Heyman ran SmackDown, he had a thing he called the SmackDown 6, where it was Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio, Edge, Big Show, and I forget who the other one was. Kurt Angle. And those 6 guys were who he built the show around. I thought it was a great concept, and it gave you great main events all the time. I always think that TNA should use a similar concept with guys like James Storm, Bobby Roode. The 6 I would pick would be James Storm, Bobby Roode, Kurt Angle again, Samoa Joe, Mr. Anderson. And, honestly, I'd probably go with somebody like Jeff Hardy just because of how popular he is. You build the matches around those 6 guys in different feuds, different versions, people are going to enjoy it. There's your main event. There's your talent. That's what sells you the show. Just my opinion. Now, next up's another answer from one of our friends, Silver84. I would have to say TJ Perkins. I think he's an awesome wrestler, but he's rarely on TV, and the manic gimmick is not needed. He, I think, would be better as himself. Couldn't agree any more. TJ Perkins, I think, is awesome. I do like him as manic, don't get me wrong, or suicide, or whatever the hell you want to call it this week. But I agree with you. I think if you just let him be TJ Perkins, he could show more of his style. As manic, he's kind of pigeonholed to what other people have done with the character. He has to include that into his moveset. I think he's a great X Division style wrestler that they could definitely use more of. Now, the person that I'm going to say that I think's the most misused is Mr. Anderson. Yes, he's been in main events. Yes, he's been world champion. But they flip-flopped him. They've made him face, heel, face, heel, face, heel so many times that there's literally times I question which he is because I don't know. He's put in the Aces and Eights. He's put in the silly thing that he's doing now with James Storm where he dresses up like a cowboy. Here's a guy, and I don't mean this as a knock on TNA. I'm just meaning this as what it is. At one point, this guy was looked at as the future main eventer, future megastar in the WWE, ran into problems there, ended up getting released because a bigger star he had issues with at the time. But they were grooming him to be that guy, that future main eventer. And when he came to TNA, he had that buzz with him. I think TNA slowly killed his buzz to the point where he's just another wrestler. Now, do they have many guys better on the mic than him? No. Do they have maybe a handful of guys? I'll rephrase that. How many guys do they have better on the mic than him? Maybe two. I would say just maybe two or three that are either better or equal: Bully Ray, Austin Aries, and Bobby Roode. Other than that, he's better than everybody else on the roster on the mic. Do they have anybody better in the ring than him? Debatable, depending on what style of wrestling you like. I think he's a good brawler, good mat-based technician. Now, you could argue some of the X Division guys, Sonata, Tigre Uno, TJ Perkins, they all have a faster pace, better style, and some would agree. Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle. However, with the way he wrestles, he tells a fantastic story, so I think he's on par with all those guys. Now, fan support. When done properly, Ken Anderson gets a huge pop, gets people chanting along with him, gets people to say his little catchphrases, all that good stuff. This is my point, folks. This is a guy that they could have made their flagship, made one of their main event guys where he's just another cog in the wheel. Just my opinion. I think they've misused him so much that it's kind of hard. It'll be kind of hard to get him back to where he actually belongs. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go into our question of the week for this week. Back in the day, TNA used to do a World Cup style thing, and this was reminded to me by the World Cup starting this week, or of FIFA soccer, or football, depending on where you live. Would you like to see TNA go back to that, where they had different countries, Canada, Mexico, Japan, America, all wrestling for dominance? The World X Cup, I think is what it was, or X World Cup. Something like that. Somebody, if you remember the name, go ahead and put it in the comments. So I didn't think to look it up before I did this. Sorry, folks. But if you'd like to see that come back, if you think it'd be a good idea for them to bring back their World Cup style tournament, or if you don't, let us know what you think. Hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on Twitter, put it down where? Down in the comments. Now we're going to get into the things I actually liked on the show. Weirdly, the one out of the three matches, the middle match with Eric Young and Kenny King, I thought was good. I liked the way they worked. I liked how they used Kenny King in the match. I liked how Eric Young was selling his previous injuries. I thought this was a great match. I think that these two meshed well together and gave me a good show. Now, last but not least, probably my favorite part of the whole night. Three-way number one contenders for the Knockouts title match. Gail Kim versus Brittany versus Madison Rayne. Thought it was a fantastic match. I thought the beautiful people on commentary at first, and then coming down in ringside and involving themselves, causing Brittany to lose and helping Gail win inadvertently. I thought it was great. I think it's great to set up the Gail Kim Beautiful People feud. I think the Brittany Madison Rayne feud is building as well. I thought it was just a good segment, good solid wrestling. Gave us something to look for, gave us a couple different feuds coming out of one match. Which is all you can ask for. You use one thing to build others. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. My favorite part of the night, personally. But going from that, we're going to go into our ratings. Now, if you've seen the show before or if you haven't, we have a 1 to 5 scale. 1 being the best, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 1's a Dixie Carter, 2's a Rockstar Spud, 3's a Gunner, 4's a James Storm, 5's a Bobby Roode. I'm going to give this show a 2, a Rockstar Spud. A lot of bad slash so-so segments. Nowhere at all did they explain that MVP might miss the pay-per-view, which they could have easily put in a later taped backstage segment, which would have helped when you watch the pay-per-view, like I said earlier. But overall, just maybe because I knew that MVP wasn't going to be in the pay-per-view going into this, it kind of put a stink on all his segments. I don't know. Just to me, it didn't sell the pay-per-view at all. But basically, that's all I have to say about that. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Heel Heat.